All right, so welcome everyone, present and future, to this May 2022 Greenhouse Talk for Dendron. So this is where we can share our learning with community members and inspire and be inspired in virtuous cycles, as we were talking about before this. And so today, Mihai has kindly stepped forward to talk about the capture, configure, control productivity system that's been proposed by Cal Newport, and some additional goodies about a little extension for VS Code that he's developed for working with Markdown task management more joyful. So without further ado, Mihai, if you'd like to jump into that.
Yes, thanks a lot. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. But before that, the idea is that for a few minutes, I will just try to provide a quick overview of what this capture configure control system is, like very basic. And then I will just jump into Dendron to just show you a little bit like a demo setup from scratch and how I use things. So yeah, let's let me see, sharing the screen. Okay. I hope this works. Can you see some large text on the screen, hopefully?
Yep, I can confirm that I see large text on the screen.
Perfect. Thanks. So indeed, as you mentioned, the title of the talk is an implementation of the capture configure control in system in Dendron. And to give you a little bit of a context how I actually use this, I'm a PhD student at Tilburg University. I do a lot of things with data. But I also like software stuff. So for me, being able to work and to keep track of my tasks and everything in Dendron was quite a big plus, because I actually do a lot of things in VS Code. So that's a little bit the context of how I found about Dendron and why I like to use Dendron and to spend time in VS Code. So as I mentioned, so I'll give a very short intro to the capture configure control system. Then I will show how this can be implemented in Dendron, and please bear in mind that this is just my take on it, so you can probably do it differently. And then I will also mention some things about BuJo, an extension that I developed to actually make working with this system capture configure control a little bit easier in terms of like time blocking, time tracking, and adding colors to tasks in Markdown and these kind of things. So the capture configure control system, well, 3 parts. CCC. The first part, capture, it's if you want like a quick alias to it to remember it, it's a brain dump. It's pretty much inspired by David Allen's ideas, where he talks about the fact that having open loops in your head is basically a productivity killer. It doesn't let you focus, and then it's always super annoying to just have this feeling that you are forgetting something. So the idea with the capture phase of this system, or David Allen's capture, as he was talking about it, is to have a trusted place where you can store all the ideas, all the tasks, all the plans, basically everything that comes towards you, and to just put it in a place. And you have to trust a place. You have to ensure that once you put a thing there, that thing is not lost. So in a nutshell, it's a brain dump. Now the second part, the configure part, as an alias, if you want, is organizing the things that you put in the capture, the things that you captured, and it goes like this. The idea is to review your captured information periodically, and then you want to be able to organize it such that it's easy to access later on. So, for example, you can organize it by category, or if you have multiple roles in your life, you can organize it by role, or as I personally do, I just organize it by project. I tend to have multiple projects, and then I just like to capture the things that I have to do for each project in their respective Dendron Markdown files, or if you want, Dendron hierarchies. And one other thing that's important about this configure part is that you want to make sure that for each of these categories, or however you organize it, you have all the relevant information that you need. So you don't want to have to go back to your email to find a piece of information about a task that you already put in your system. You want to make sure that everything that you need is actually in one place, such that whenever you look at the things, you have a clear overview, and then you very easily know what you need to do next. And the control part, which I actually think is the more interesting part of this system, because it's the part where actually the deep work and the deep work gets done, is the control. So the idea with the control is that you do not want to work in a reactive way. So let's say that you have a to-do list, and then you just take a task from that to-do list and you want to do, or you work based on your inbox, email inbox. The idea is that you want to, instead working in a reactive way, you want to be proactive. So you want to be able to think ahead and make a plan for the time that you have available. And you can do this type of planning at the different levels. You can do it at a yearly level, a quarterly level, at weekly level. It's up to you. But the point is that you don't want to reach the state where you say like, okay, what should I be doing next? You always want to actually give, for example, each minute of your day a job. So you always want to know what you're supposed to be doing next. And I think the key, at least for me, the key idea here is to actually do time blocking, as you can see it here on the left. And time blocking basically means, or time boxing basically means that you block times throughout your day for specific tasks. So, in a nutshell, these are like the three elements. I only like super scratched the surface here, but I also put a link in the presentation if you want to hear more about this. But the takeaways for actually implementing this in Dendron would be, to have a place to capture these kind of things, to have schemas, as Dendron calls them, to organize tasks and nodes, and to be able to plan at different levels. And something that I've been struggling a lot with actually doing time blocking, because on a piece of paper, that seems to be, as you see it in this slide here, this is, for example, time blocking. On a piece of paper, this makes sense, and it seems also easy to do. You can always scratch and remake things and replan throughout the day as your day goes through. But then in Markdown tables, or in Markdown files, that seems a bit difficult. I'll also show you how I do it, and if you have any suggestions about that, I would be super happy to hear. And I'll put the slides online, and you can access these links later. So that's the idea with the capture configure control. And now I'll jump into showing you a little bit about my setup and how this works. So every day when I open, let's say, my notes, or my daily planner, as I call it, I see these two screens. So on the left side, I have my daily log that is created for each day. So for example, if I created, I just recreated it right now, then this is the daily log for the current day. And then on the other side, I have my list of projects. And for now, I just removed everything and created a demo repository. So before actually talk about these two parts, so the daily log, the daily planner, and the project list, I want to go through all those steps that I mentioned in the presentation. So for me, the general place where I capture all the things is this log.future, as you can also see it here. And then whenever I have something, or whenever I don't know where to put a thing, or an idea, or a task that I haven't yet scheduled, I just dump things in here. Now, the next level of organization for me is the yearly or quarterly plan, where I just try to split my year per quarters, and then just try to allocate some goals for each quarter. I try to just keep it to 3 goal stops, and then I just have an event list for the months where I add some significant events that happen throughout the year for me. All right, not going to spend that much time because I think the most interesting part is the daily log, but just mentioning this. And then the other level of planning is the weekly planning. And how I go about the weekly planning is that for each, at the end of the week or at the beginning of each week, I just try to think for each day based on my quarterly plan, like what would be interesting for me to achieve in terms of a goal for that particular week. And then I just say like, okay, Monday, for example, I just want to focus on paper writing, and let's say that Thursday I'll put all my teaching and this kind of thing. So I just try to have an idea of what to do for each day. And now the daily log, which I think is the more interesting part. This is what my template looks like. So when I create a daily log, I have some metrics that I track every day. And then I have my daily logs where I just take notes throughout the day as things happen. And then I have the time blocking table, and then I have the time tracking table. And whenever I start a day, what I basically do is like I'm trying to think, okay, what are the things that I want to do today based on my weekly plan? So then I just say, like, let's say, for example, I want to work from 8 until 10. I want to have like a deep work chunk, and then I want to focus on paper writing or something like this. And throughout the day, in reality, it's very hard to just keep to these blocks because either task takes too long or too short or something comes up. But the idea is that I want to get back to this time blocking table and always adjust the time that I have left and just plan and make sure that always I just have an updated plan for what comes next. So and I also want to have a overview of how things change. So for example, what I like to do when, and this should actually be time block ref. Yeah, there you go. So what I like to do is that every time to replan and to make sure that I see how my plan changed throughout the day, basically. And these are like some shortcuts that I have. So then let's say that I made an adjustment here and some other activity that I am planning. Let's say that this actually happened for this interval or something like that. So then each morning I'm basically making this kind of time blocking, which right now looks horrible and probably doesn't make much sense. Sorry for that. But after I make this time block planning, then I go through my list of projects, and I have a file where I have like the entire list of projects. And then I look at the backlog for each project, and I'm trying to say, okay, for this day, what does it make sense to do? And then I pick some tasks, and then I move them to new actions, and then I want to be able to track the time. And normally what I do, I just copy these tasks to this particular table here, but that's tedious. So I actually use a small extension I made for this. So it has a command to schedule, and then it asks me which file I want to put this. So it'll be 28, and it just simply adds these things to the table. Or in case there is a Dendron wiki link, and I can just simply extract the alias. So let's say 28, or it should also be possible, for example, instead of using the alias, to just, so I was using the file name. So in this case, if I just want to reschedule this, and I will be using the alias. Oh, sorry for that. So schedule and 28, and now I will be using the alias. And of course, something went wrong, and that thing went wrong. So I'm going to delete this and just do it again from scratch, and 28, and then that should be just fine. Okay, and then when I start walking throughout the days, then basically what I do, I just want to make sure that these tasks are visible, that I know which task I work on. So I just put a symbol here that indicates that this task is in progress, and these shortcuts that I'm pressing right now, or for example the commands that I'm using, it will be from the extension that I mentioned. So set in progress, and it will just simply add 1/ to the task. And then in terms of time tracking, because I also want to have an overview of this, there is another command that I use quite a lot, and it should be record time. Yes, it is record time, and it simply just adds a time the hour and the minute when the task ended. And if, for example, I want to just continue, then it just adds a record when the task stops. And then if you it happens that you start working, but then you go away from the computer, but then you come later and you want to work and you didn't work sequentially on this, you can simply just continue adding tasks, and then we'll just add it as you go throughout the day. And finally, at the end of the day, but right now there is actually no time. I also like to just calculate the time that I have available, but in this case is 0 minutes. But let's say that we put to 20, and then well, that should give me 62 minutes and or 1.03 hours. So yeah, that's in a nutshell how I actually use the system. And then you will notice that I have this kind of colors and this kind of symbols, and then these are based on a small extension that I developed that you can also find on GitHub. And I use the symbols in my own way. I'm just also checking the time because I don't hear the hand or don't hear the cough.
Mihai, it's okay. You can keep going. We'll have some more time after this.
Okay. So you will see, as I said, that I have these kind of symbols. Well, I actually use this extension to change these symbols, and then I can change from a number of them. And these are somewhat borrowed from bullet journal. So, for example, this would be a task migrated backwards. This will be a task migrated forward. So I'm looking at this particular task here. Or this would be an open task. This will be a completed task. This will be a dropped task. This will be an event, I think. It's called in BuJo terminology. I just like to use these kind of symbols to have an idea of how these tasks are happening. So for me, the logical sequence is that the backlog is always the first in time. So if I move a task, for example, from the backlog to the time tracking table, I usually just indicate this with the symbol, because then it makes it easy to search via VSCode to see which tasks from backlog files are migrated. And usually after I'm done finishing a task, so now I'm looking at this one here in the time tracking table, I just mark it as done, and using the links and the block code IDs, I can jump back to it and also mark the corresponding task as done. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's how I use it. And these colors and like these commands to change the task or to move tasks back and forth and to just track the time, they're like based on the small extension that I wrote. Yeah, I think that's it. And if you have any questions, maybe I can then show you a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. And I really like your use of the block anchors to like link back to the backlog. One question I had is, how do you, or like for the time tracking blocks, what do you do with that? Do you schedule some time to like review how long different projects take, or like does it feed into some other review cycle, or do you find just like doing the process by itself is like all you need for like in terms of time tracking?
So for two reasons. First is because due to the nature of my work is I don't have very clear deadlines. And it always makes it very difficult to understand exactly when I'm productive and when I'm not productive. So I try to take an approach in the sense that I don't really necessarily look at the output, but I actually look at the number of deep hours or concentration hours that I put into working into a project. And that at the end of the day, that actually is satisfying, because I say, okay, you know, I don't have anything to actually show at the end of this day, but hey, I did actually 4 hours of deep work. So that's satisfying. But it also helps me to actually report the hours that I work to my employer, because we need to do this for certain projects because of the grants. So I do actually have at the end of the month a review that I actually go through all those to all those hours, and I didn't show it right now, but I also have a way to actually update the tasks in the backlog based on the time that was spent in the time tracking. I was supposed to show it also today, but the demo didn't work. Sorry.
Okay, that was really cool. Ben, did you have anything to add, or?
Well, I mean, just so I can see how it's helping. So there's that retrospective aspect that you just talked about, and it's also helping you keep track of what you're going to do moment to moment in the present. And there's that dimension of future planning. I just think it's cool to see how it integrates everything. And I mean, I'm wondering if you have more plans to to extend the extension, and what other capabilities you're going to add, if any, or if it's you just wanted to make something that's enough for your work.
I definitely have plans to extend this. When I started this, I actually first tried to put this into Dendron and send it as a PR request, but then I was wondering whether this would fit or not. Maybe it's a little bit too specific, so that's how it started. And more specifically, what I would like to do next is that every day when I actually create that time blocking table, I want to pull the events from the Google Calendar so that I always have the appointments visible in the time block table, so I know how I can plan my day around those events without having to go to Google Calendar and back and forth. So that would be an example.
Oh, sweet. So yeah, maybe there's an opportunity for a pod there or something to make that happen.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Awesome. So
Thanks.
hey, Ash Simmons, welcome. We're just at the conclusion of Mihai's talk. So
No, I was just going to add that which is recorded, so you can always come back and watch the video.
I'd just like to see the links after you guys post the recording to follow up on your read up on your CCC methodology. I liked the presentation; it was really interesting. But I want to read up a little more on how your thought process on that in more depth. But anyways, I'll take a look at the links once you post them. Appreciate it.
Yes, and if you also have questions or you want like a more in-depth overview of how I use this, please feel free to reach out.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a big fan of BuJo. I mean, since I started reading it after Kevin gave us a link to that. So I really am trying to use that methodology as well. So that's great. Thank you.
That's cool.
Yeah, BuJo, journaling for busy people is how I think of it.
Maybe busy journaling, right? Yeah. Okay, so Kevin, I know you wanted to talk about having remote and local workspaces or vaults together and applications of that. Is that something you'd want to go into now?
Yeah, and then if everybody is free, I think, so this talk will probably be around 10 minutes, give or take. So we'll we'll extend so the talk will go a little over time, but yeah, so if anybody needs to go, feel free, but otherwise, I will talk a little bit about local workspaces. So let me just turn off all notifications so that things are a little clean, and I'll share my screen. And so today's talk, I do not have anything as well put together as Mihai, but hopefully it will be useful nonetheless. And what I will be talking about is something that we introduced in Dendron a couple of releases ago. And this is a local config, the local config override. And what this is it's a dendronrc.yml file that you can either add to the home of your desktop or inside a current vault. And what it lets you do is it lets you add custom configuration that is not present in the dendron.yml. And the dendron.yml, essentially, that's the source of file metadata in Dendron. So it tells Dendron what are all the vaults, what are all the settings, what are all the things of how you configure Dendron. And the reason we made this local override is because it's useful in the cases where you use Dendron in a shared setting. So for example, inside our team, what you're seeing right now, this is like the team workspace, and we have a bunch of vaults that are specific to the team. But I also have my personal vault, and instead of having two different workspaces open, or committing my personal vault to the team vault, I'm able to add my vault as a local override. And so this is a dendronrc.yml that I have locally. And if we compare that to the dendron.yml, so this is the dendron.yml for the team. There's a lot here because we actually use quite a number of vaults. Some of these are like the public blog, the public site, the public handbook. So it's easy for us to update and handle. Then we also have a private vault where everybody keeps track of their daily journal. And this is stuff that the entire team has access to. But then what the dendronrc.yml lets me do is I have some specific vaults. So there's an admin vault that deals more with like financials, performance, and some other things. And then I also have two private vaults where I keep my own notes. And sometimes it's useful for me to reference that or like to switch to my daily journal while I'm still in the team workspace. And now to kind of see an example of how this would work. So this is the repository for the Dendron handbook. And it has, it's public, anyone's free to check it out or take inspiration from it. And what I'll do is I'm just gonna clone this locally and add a local override to it. So right now, let's see. Let me use Code Insider to open it. And right now, what we have is the Dendron handbook. And let's say, like, you know, maybe you're interested in the handbook, but you also want to add some additional, like maybe you want to add this to your team vault, but you don't necessarily want to commit it, or you want to add your own vault to it, but you don't want to, like, you still want to be able to pull without having to like commit your changes. In this case, what you would do is in the same folder where you have the dendron.yml, you would create a new file. So this would be dendronrc.yml. And so in dendron.rc.yml, you can add it. Anything that is valid in dendron.yml is also valid in dendronrc.yml. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I am going to add one of my local vaults. So the Kevin public vault, this is part of my public website. I'm going to add this to the Dendron handbook. So I'm going to copy the full path to this. And then I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Kevin. And now, if I reload my workspace, what's going to happen is Dendron, when it starts up, it's going to combine the vaults from the Dendron handbook with the vaults from my local override. So now if you look at the tree view, I have both Kevin and the Dendron handbook. I'm able to navigate across the contents of either one. And if we take a look at the handbook, so right now dendronrc.yml isn't in the gitignore, but it should be. So the idea is that this is a file that you can configure locally and update locally, without commingling those changes with whatever shared vault you're doing or you're using. And so this is really useful for like team kind of use cases where you have a shared vault and then you might have your own private vault. But this is also useful for another use case, which is publishing. And so something that has been brought up a lot is like there's a bunch of content that I'm interested in publishing, but maybe there's like a few things that are private. I don't necessarily want to share that, but I want to share excerpts of that. And one way you can do that with these local config overrides is what I'm going to show in my own website. So let's see. Where am I going with this? Aha. So I have a repository, the Kevin Public Garden. So the Kevin Public Garden is what is hosting and what is deploying kevineslin.com. And it consists of three vaults. So there's the Kevin Public, which is basically everything. And then there's Kevin Blog. And that's because like before Dendron, I had hosted my blog on Jekyll, and that was a different repository. And so the blog is in a different vault. But then there's another vault called Highlights. And so Highlights is essentially it's synced with all my Kindle highlights and all my public highlights of articles. And that's not something that I'm currently publishing publicly, mostly because I feel like somebody might sue me if I just like publish all my highlights, because I live in America and sometimes that happens. And so instead, I will selectively excerpt things from what I'm reading. So for example, this is like analogy about the hermit crab from The Art of Learning that I've included as a mental model, but I've also I made a note reference of that note inside of this public note. And so the way that works is so this is not actually published with GitHub, it's published with Amplify, which is an AWS service. The details aren't that important right now. The more interesting part is if you look at the way that I do the publishing, I have a file called dendronrc.publish.yml. And essentially what this is doing is it's adding my highlights vault. It has the configurations to pull down my highlights vault. And what I do in this case in my Amplify script is because that highlights vault is in a private Git repo, I configured a deploy key for it. And this is a GitHub specific option, but there's something like this in any kind of in GitLab as well, or like if you run your own setup, you can configure your own keys. But the idea is I have a key that can access this highlights vault. And so I add it to the pipeline in GitHub Actions so that it is able to access that vault. Then I copy dendronrc publish as dendronrc so that Dendron can recognize it. And then I programmatically initialize the workspace and pull the workspace. And so at this point in the build pipeline, Dendron has access to the highlights vault. And then at this point, I can run the Dendron publish export. And what basically happens is Dendron is able to resolve this node reference. And notice that also like there's no link to this node reference because it's not accessible otherwise. But so essentially though, this accomplishes the use case of I publish mostly publicly, but there's excerpts from my private vaults that I want to include. How do I do that in a way that doesn't expose like that private vault? And so this is an example of a workflow that incorporates that. And I'll do a little bit more of a detailed write-up on like these steps and what it entails. You can also run this in GitHub Actions or really anywhere else. The main takeaway here is just that however you publish your website, being able to pull down a private vault and then running publish on it. All right, and these are just like some of the use cases for like having a local configuration override. There's a lot more that you can do. For example, you can have like, if you download vaults, you can have like a set of default vaults that regardless of what vault you're in, like you always have available. You can have custom options. There's a lot more there's a lot more use cases there. But today what I wanted to highlight is just the use case of using your own notes in a shared environment, as well as publishing publishing excerpts from private repositories into public repositories. All right, that is those are all the points I was going to cover. Any questions or comments?
I don't know if I have a question here, but I'm one of those people who, thinking I do want to publish some things, but I do also want to retain my privacy, and maybe there's some things I'd excerpt. So, I mean, I'll definitely be playing around with this and seeing what I can do. It seems very cool.
Also, not necessarily a question, but to my shame, I do not use multiple vaults because I always thought they were actually a bit too complicated for my understanding. But now, after seeing this kind of use case, I understand how beneficial it could be to have just the nodes separately and to also be able to have, for example, such a vault in our lab where we do the readings and to be able to just have our notes for the papers that we read. Is there, can you recommend where to actually look into this to learn more about how to set it up and to configure it?
Yeah, so in terms of having multiple vaults, like definitely it's something that we want to simplify because it is today too hard to just simply do it. We have, so a couple of links I will say. One is our multi-vault kind of guide. I'm gonna send you a bunch of links after this. So this just has like multi-vaults, like why you might use it and how to set it up. But also, I think we have a workflow that one of our users has contributed. Specifically, this is like setting up a public-private multi-vault. So these are the places where I would start. And then if you run into any issues or have any questions, you know where to find us.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I have another question if no one else has a question, so I will shut up, and only if no one else has anything, I'll ask.
I'd say go for it, and then, well, I mean, we still have time, so go.
I was curious about what's your setup with the Kindle notes, and how do you get them into Dendron?
Yeah, so my Kindle Note setup is interesting. I use a service called Readwise. So Readwise, unfortunately, it is not free, but it's like, I think like $2 or $5 a month. It lets you sync your highlights from Kindle, Hypothesis, Instapaper, and a bunch of other places all into one place, into Readwise, so that you have access, and then you can sync that into like Evernote or like other places. And then the way that I actually get them into Dendron is, let's see, I think I wrote about this. Oh yeah, not in that, but in my Readwise setup. So yeah, so I actually have like a loom about my Leadwise, but what I do is I use the Obsidian Leadwise plugin. So they basically are able to take the contents of your Leadwise and then copy them into an Obsidian vault. But then that Obsidian vault is my Dendron highlights vault. And this setup here is I just, one of the things they let you categorize is like how you want to change the titles. And so I have this like file transform that like changes the title to be like the dendron.hierarchy. And the way that it looks like is under highlights. Well, we can take a look. I don't know if my highlights vault is part of this. Yes, it is. So you can see, or is it part of this? I think I might have it in a different place right now. But essentially, I use this transformation to make sure that the naming scheme from Leadwise translates well into the dendron.hierarchy. And I think, so this is like a snapshot of like my settings for making that work.
That is awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? I think it's, I don't see any notifications, but I'm also curious how long we can just like maintain silence in like a video channel until it gets awkward.
Well, it's only as awkward as you want it to be, right?
You're not actually proposing, we're trying, right?
Yeah. But yeah, otherwise I think we're good.
Okay. Well, so thanks for coming out to the greenhouse, everybody. And happy gardening.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Mihai, thank you for the talk, and I am definitely installing the extension and will be giving that a try this weekend. And also, happy Memorial Day weekend for, well, people in America, but otherwise just in general having a good weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. It's always,
Thanks as well.
I always learn something new in these talks. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the plan. Okay.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Bye.